There is this song. That's not actually quite right. My middle school band director was really strict that songs have words. She would announce that at concerts to parents who were about to call the things that we were about to play songs. She was very clear, songs have words. And this doesn't have words. So there's this tune. No, that's also not quite right. My middle school band director didn't say, but I'm pretty sure that tunes have notes, and this doesn't have notes. So there's this composition. There's this composition that feels like it was due at some point, but the composer hadn't worked on it and just came up at the last minute with here's the thing that I have. It's this composition by a guy named John Cage called 4 minutes and 33 seconds. You might have heard of it before. You have almost certainly heard it before. What happens is the musician comes out and they sit down at their instruments, maybe the piano or the bassoon or the saxophone or the violin or the cello or the harpsichord or whatever it is, and they don't do anything for 4 minutes and 33 seconds. And the deal is, the thing is, what you're supposed to do during that time is hear all of the things that are happening when the music isn't playing. You get to hear the audience shuffle in their seats a little bit. You get to hear someone clear their throat and someone else unwrap a cough drop. Maybe you hear some footsteps in the hallway outside the concert hall. Maybe you hear the hum of the amplifiers and all that kind of stuff. Maybe you hear some birds outside, if it's not a particularly well soundproofed concert hall. All of that stuff suddenly is framed as music. Because it turns out that silence isn't that silent. Quiet isn't that quiet. There's always stuff happening, and what it is depends on how you listen to it. Sometimes it's noise. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's music. There are these rooms. I don't know how many there are. I think there are just a few around the world. They're specially designed so that if you stand in the room and you say something, what you say carries through the air and hits the wall and stops. They're called anechoic chambers. Like if you listen to me now, you can hear the echo. You can hear my voice bouncing off the walls and the ceiling and doing all of that stuff, but in these rooms that doesn't happen. The walls are specially designed, right? The sound hits them, it stops dead. I have heard that they are very quiet and very uncomfortable to be in. Because when you're standing in an anechoic chamber and you're not saying anything, suddenly it is quiet all around you. Suddenly you don't hear anything at all except the beating of your own heart, the churning of your own stomach, the little sound that your throat makes when you swallow, all of those noises that are just part of you. It turns out that even real silence not framed as music, silence not in a place where there are other sounds, silence in a room that deadens sound altogether, isn't that silent. Turns out that we are, even when we're not making a sound, pretty noisy. I'm telling you this because in today's reading, Elijah encounters silence. A little bit of context. We're in this moment when there's kind of a civil war going on in Israel. On one side, you have the king of Israel, Ahab, his wife Jezebel, and they've been importing foreign gods. They've been bringing in other religions and trying to kind of change the religious culture of Israel, saying, worship these guys, follow their prophets, do what they say. And a lot of people are going along with that because the king is saying, worship these guys, listen to their prophets, do what they say. On the other side, you have Elijah. And Elijah is trying to maintain worship in the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, in the God who led the people out of slavery in Egypt to this land of milk and honey, in the God of Israel. And they have been fighting. They've been at war. There has been death and destruction and a lot of problematic stuff. It's not a pretty story. Elijah has just killed a bunch of people. And Jezebel has just sworn revenge, and Elijah is on the run because while Elijah can do some damage, Jezebel has an army. He is on his own, and he is afraid. And eventually he comes to this broom tree, and he sits under it, and he falls asleep. And he wakes up to an angel tapping him on the shoulder saying, you need to eat something. So he eats something. Because when you are afraid and on the run and you don't know what's going to happen and you're worried about your very life, a snack and a nap is a pretty good idea. I will always advocate for a snack and a nap. But then the angel tells him, I've got a place for you to go. You need to go to Mount Horeb. God wants to talk to you. And Elijah isn't quite sure. Elijah's like, can't I just die? But yeah, I mean, snack, nap, I'll go to Mount Horeb. And he goes to Mount Horeb, and he goes up the mountain, and he kind of hides himself in a cave. And there is a great wind that comes whistling, blowing out. I don't know if you remember the derecho we had a couple years ago. The great sound that brings, the rushing of wind. It is splitting rocks. It is tearing mountains open. And Elijah waits because Elijah knows that God is not in the wind. And then there's an earthquake. The mountain shakes and boulders fall. There's cracking and breaking. And Elijah waits. Because Elijah knows that God is not in the earthquake. And then there is fire raining down from the sky, burning the scrub and bushes all around him. And Elijah waits because Elijah knows that God is not in the fire. And then there is the sound of sheer silence. I want to be clear, not the silence of 4 minutes and 33 seconds, not the silence of John Cage. There's no, like, oh, it's quiet, but somebody over there is opening a cough drop kind of silence. And not the silence of an anechoic chamber. Not the deep silence where he can hear his own heartbeat and hear the juices in his stomach churning. No, a sheer silence, an absolute silence, a complete quiet. And that is when Elijah steps out to meet God. We're in this sermon series on doubt. Some doubt is easy doubt. It's kind of shallow doubt. It's the doubt that goes, sometimes I'm not sure God is real. Sometimes I'm not totally positive about a literal resurrection. Sometimes I question whether love is really breaking forth into the world and repairing our brokenness. And those are serious doubts. Those are important doubts. Those are doubts we have to take seriously and take as important, but there is this deeper doubt. There is this deep down doubt. There's this thing that we feel sometimes, and no amount of saying that we believe is going to fix it. No amount of calling out and insisting on our faith is going to fix it. There is sometimes this deep down doubt that says, I don't know if any of this is worth anything. Can't I just die? this might all be meaningless and pointless and stupid. This might be worth nothing. There is that kind of doubt that is deep silence, that is sheer silence, where we can't hear anything. And it is in those moments possible to just stay there, to step back into our caves, to retreat and say, it's quiet out there. I mean, would that there would be a great wind that would come up, would that there would be an earthquake, would that there would be a fire, would that I would get some kind of display to prove to me that this is all something real. But I'm not getting that, so I'll hide away. But there's the other option. There's the choice that Elijah makes to step out into the silence and meet God there. As I was thinking about this passage this week, as I was thinking about this message this week, my head kept going back to Christ on the cross. I kept finding myself in that place. Christ has been arrested. Christ has been sentenced. Christ has been beaten. Christ has been whipped. Christ has been made to carry a cross. Christ has been put up on a cross. There are nails through his wrists and his ankles. And he has to be questioning things. I know that sounds a little sacrilegious, but it's right there in Scripture that he is questioning things because he cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Those are close to the same things that Elijah is feeling. My God, why am I on my own? Why am I here? Why do I not have anything? Would you mind doing something? Maybe a great wind or an earthquake or a fire or something. Maybe a revolution would be awesome. Remake the world so that I'm not here in this place, suffering in silence. And it's this weird moment for Christ. It's this weird moment for Jesus because we know from the outside that is the God who is love, who laid aside glory and became one of us. We know that is the Word become flesh. We know that is not just a guy on a cross, but God on a cross, crying out to themselves about being abandoned. It is maybe a moment where the humanity of Christ overwhelms everything else and cries out on behalf of all of humanity, on behalf of Elijah, on behalf of us, on behalf of everyone. My God, why have you forsaken me?" Not realizing that God is right there on the cross. That God is right there with him. What it means for Elijah to step out of that cave. What it means for Elijah to do that thing. It means that Elijah knows. Elijah knows that, yes, God might sometimes be in wind. God might sometimes be in earthquakes. God might sometimes be in fire. God might sometimes be in floods. God might sometimes be in the big, huge things. But when it comes down to it, when you are in the deepest of trouble, when it is silence all around you, when there is no hope, when there is no faith, when there is nothing left, when you are dried out and a husk of yourself, God is right there with you. Elijah steps out of the cave and meets God. And the troubling parts of the story continue. The war is going to keep going, and God's going to be on one side of that, and more people are going to die. But the focus in this moment is not on all of that. It is on the fact that here is someone who is scared and uncertain and unsure and does not know how to go on. And in that moment, God is right there with him. Even and maybe especially in the silence. And so as we go on, as we work our way through this little series on doubt, as we take doubt seriously, as we take uncertainty seriously, as we take unbelief seriously, as we take those moments when we just don't have any of it, when it's not welling up inside of us, when we are left alone and scared and a husk of ourselves, even then, maybe even especially then, God is right there with us. If we're willing to take our eyes off of all of the distractions and all of the expectations and all of the stuff, if we're willing to take our ears off of all of the big things and all of the distractions and all of the stuff, if we're willing to look and to listen in the sheer silence, in the nothingness that surrounds us, we just might encounter the God who will lead us out of that. And who will tell us to have a snack and take a nap. And who will fill us again with hope and faith and life. So do not be afraid of silence. God is in the silence. Thanks be to God.